The Ghanaian diplomat reportedly died at the hospital in Switzerland, Saturday morning. He served as the 7th Secretary General of the United Nations from January 1997 to December 2006. He was the first to emerge from the ranks of United Nations, UN, staff to serve as the Secretary General. Kofi Atta Annan and the UN were the co-recipients of the 2001 Nobel Peace Prize. He was the founder and chairman of the Kofi Annan Foundation, as well as chairman of the Elders, an international organization founded by Nelson Mandela. The cause of death has not been made public, but Mr. Annan has not been well for some time now. Kofi Atta Annan was born in Kumasi, in central Ghana, Africa, on April 8, 1938. Since 1960, Ghana has been a republic within the British Commonwealth, a group of nations dependent on Great Britain. Named for an African empire along the Niger River, Ghana was ruled by Great Britain for 113 years as the Gold Coast. Annan is descended from tribal chiefs on both sides of his family. His father was an educated man, and Annan became accustomed to both traditional and modern ways of life. He has described himself as being a tribal in a tribal world. After receiving his early education at a leading boarding school in Ghana, Annan attended the College of Science and Technology in the capital of Kumasi. At the age of 20, he won a Ford Foundation scholarship for undergraduate studies at Macalester College in St. Paul, Minnesota, where he studied economics. Even then he was showing signs of becoming a diplomat, or someone skilled in international relations. Annan received his bachelor's degree in economics in 1961. Shortly after completing his studies at Macalester College, Annan headed for Geneva, Switzerland, where he attended graduate classes in economics at the Institut Universitaire de Hautes Études Internationales. Following his graduate studies in Geneva, Annan joined the staff of the World Health Organization, WHO, a branch of the United Nations. He served as an administrative officer and as budget officer in Geneva. Later UN posts took him to Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, and New York City, New York. Annan always assumed that he would return to his native land after college, although he was disturbed by the unrest and numerous changes of government that occurred there during the 1970s. Annan became the Alfred P. Sloan Fellow at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. At the end of his fellowship in 1972, he was awarded a Master of Science degree in management. Rather than return to Ghana upon graduation, he accepted a position at the UN headquarters in New York City. In 1974 he moved to Cairo, Egypt, as Chief Civilian Personnel Officer in the UN Emergency Force. Annan briefly changed careers in 1974 when he left the United Nations to serve as Managing Director of the Ghana Tourist Development Company. Annan returned to international diplomacy and the United Nations in 1976. For the next 7 years, he was associated with the Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees in Geneva. He returned to the UN headquarters in New York City in 1983 as Director of the Budget in the Financial Services Office. Later in the 1980s, he filled the post of Assistant Secretary General in the Office of Human Resources Management and served as Security Coordinator for the United Nations. In 1990, he became Assistant Secretary General for another department at the United Nations, the Office of Program Planning, Budget, and Finance. In fulfilling his duties to the United Nations, Annan has spent most of his adult life in the United States, specifically at the UN headquarters in New York City. Annan had by this time filled a number of roles at the United Nations, ranging from peacekeeping to managerial, and the 1990s were no different. In 1990 he negotiated the release of hostages in Iraq following the invasion of Kuwait. 5 years later, he oversaw the transition of the United Nations Protection Force, UNPROFOR, to the Multinational Implementation Force, IFOR, a UN peacekeeping organization. In this transfer of responsibility, operations in the former Yugoslavia were turned over to the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO. In recognition of his abilities, Annan was appointed Secretary General, the top post of the UN, by the UN General Assembly in December 1996. He began serving his 4-year term of office on January 1, 1997. Joining him was his second wife, former lawyer Nanne Lagergren of Sweden. She is the niece of the diplomat Raoul Wallenberg, 1912, c.1947, who saved thousands of European Jews from the German Nazis during World War II, 1939-45, when American-led forces fought against Germany, Italy, and Japan. Annan and Lagergren were married in 1985 and had one child.